All right, you should be on the page that we started yesterday called Solving Inequalities, and you probably have some notes that we took in class on the first few lines. I don't have those on my copy here, but you're going to be working right on this page. I'm going to do 2 examples from your actual homework page, and so if you need a little support with this strategy, with this skill, you should use this video. So I'm going to start with number 1. Take a moment to copy it down if you haven't already. And I'm going to begin this problem by making a line down my inequality sign. This inequality is less than or equal to. I know that because the less than part, the smaller part of the arrow, comes first, and or equal to is that line. So I'm going to just solve this like I would if it were a regular equation with an equal sign. So right away what I notice is I have 2 terms here that each have an x. I have 3 positive x's and I have 6 negative x's. I'm going to have to take those 2 things and put them together. What's actually going to happen is I'm going to have some 0 pairs. I've got 3 positive x's here, and I have enough negative x's to cancel those out. So when I take off my 3 positive x's, I know I'm going to have to take 3 of these negative x's away to zero those out, and I'll be left with 3 negative x's. I've also got this positive 12. You can write the positive, but usually we don't write positive right before a number, so I'm just going to call that 12. I'm going to leave my arrow here as usual, and I've got negative 9 on the right. Now that I'm down to one number, one x on the left, and something similar on the right, I'm going to start to black out my terms. I've got a positive 12. I've got a negative 9, which means if I'm looking to get rid of this 12, because I kind of like to isolate my x's, I can't take 9 off each side. I can't take 12 off each side. This is positive and this is negative. So that means that I'm going to have to bring in a negative 12, and I'll bring in a negative 12. And by doing that, I create a 0 pair on the left I can cross off. I've got negative 3x is less than or equal to. Now I have to add up 9 negatives to 12 negatives, and I get 21 negatives. And so now I have to take a look. This is where I need to pause when I'm solving an inequality. It's not important when I'm solving an equation, but remember I need to look at my x's. I need to make sure that my x's are either positive or negative and know which one they are. And I need to make sure that because these are negative x's, I flip-flop my arrow in the other direction. So now when I go for my answer and I'm trying to figure out what one x is worth, I need to think to myself, negative 3 times something would give me negative 21. Well, I know 21 times 3 is 7. And I know that in order for negative 3 times something to be negative 21, this would have to be a positive. So my answer is that x is greater than or equal to 7. It used to be less than here. It was switched because I had negative x's in my last step. Now you guys have lines if you're using the worksheet. If you're not using the worksheet, if you're doing your work in your notebook, then you're going to make a portion of the number line. This is the positive, so we go up from left to right. You have to pay attention to the symbol you have. If you have or equal to, you're going to make a dot that is shaded right on your answer, 7. And then because this is greater than 7, we're going to make an arrow in the greater than direction. All right, I am jumping down to, whoops, I made a mistake. I'm not jumping down to number 2. I'm actually jumping to number 7. So in number 7, I chose it because there's a couple things to pay attention to. The first is that we've got parentheses. So this 2 means we're going to repeat all of this 2 times. So 2 repetitions of x looks like 2x, And 2 repetitions of -3 looks like -6. I've also got a 5x here. That is not part of my repetitions. It's just over to the right, over here. And then I've got a 9x minus 14 on the right. So I'm going to make my line, now that I've kind of got that translated, I'm going to make my line down my inequality sign. And I'm going to start to look at some moves that I can make. First off, I've got 2 x's here, and I've got 5 x's here, and there's no reason to list them separately, so I'm going to add them up and combine them into 7x. I also have then a -6 over here. Remember, you really have to pay attention to the sign before the number because it always travels with it. So if I take out my 2x and my 5x, I'm left with this -6, which is down here. Right now my symbol, is staying the same. And I've got 9x minus 14. So here's where I'm going to start to block off what I've got. First thing I notice is I have 9 x's over here and 7 over here. So I am going to cross off my 7 on the left and take away 7 from my 9 on the right, which leaves me with -6 on the left. I have 2 leftover x's on the right and a -14. So now I do have negatives on each side, and I could take 6 negatives off of the left and 6 off of the right, but then I'd end up with nothing over here, and those are a little bit harder to solve. So the number I'd really like to get rid of is -14. So what I'm going to have to do is bring in a +14 and a +14. So now my 2x is isolated. And I have to figure out the difference between 14 and 6 because I have some 0 pairs here that I have to take care of. So +14 plus -6 should leave me with +8. So now I'm going to pause here. I'm going to take a look. I have positive x's in this problem. So because I have positive x's in this problem, I can leave my final symbol like this. I know that 2 times 4 gives me 8, so x must be 4. And now I've run into a situation we didn't talk about yesterday. My x is on the right, and so reading this, you have to be very, very careful. What this problem is telling me, since x is by the bigger part of the arrow, it's telling me that x is actually greater than 4. I always look at where x is and whether it's by the greater part of the arrow or the less than part of the arrow. This happens to be the greater than. So when I make my shaded dot on 4, even though it looks like this arrow is pointing to the left, I need to make mine go to the right because x is greater than 4 and 4 is less than x.